Bienvenidos and welcome back to Puro Pinche Gol, the place where we discuss all things USMNT y la selección mexicana. My name is Adrian. I'm joined once again by my co-host and tocayo, Adrián. Adrián, how you doing, man?
I'm doing all right, man. Hope you're doing great as well. Lot of things to talk about, what it means for the USMNT, the recent news and whatnot. So I'm excited, dude.
Yeah, man, let's get into it. This episode, we'll be discussing the sack, the glorious sack, not so glorious sack, of
I
Jesse
know.
Marsch at
Right?
Leeds United. Yeah, RIP to him. Man, well, we'll get into it. We'll get into it. What does this mean for him? What does this mean for the American players that are still at Leeds, Weston McKennie, Tyleradams, Brendan
Mhm.
Aaronson? And what does this mean for the U.S. national team as it still, stands without a coach currently? Before we dive into it, Adrian, where can our listeners find us, man?
If they want to see our pretty faces, dude, they can find us on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe, hit like button, and turn on the notifications. If they're okay just listening to our pretty voices, they can find us on any podcast service like Apple Podcasts and Spotify or any other podcast service they are a subscriber on.
Yep, sounds good, man. So let's get right into it. So Jesse Marsch obviously was fired earlier this week after the loss for Leeds to Nottingham Forest. Just a couple stats here from that game that pretty much summarize Jesse Marsch's tenure at Leeds. I would think
Yeah. Hmm.
his team had more shots, 10-6, had more shots on target, 4-2, dominated possession, 70% to 30%, had double the amount of passes, had 74% pass accuracy compared to 54, less yellow cards. They had 3 offsides, Nottingham had 2, and Leeds had only 2 corners, Nottingham had 0. So that's pretty much been the case for Leeds under Jesse Marsch's tenure. He's gotten some big results against big teams like Chelsea, Liverpool. But the teams where he should be winning those battles against the relegation sides, Nottingham, Everton, those lower league teams, Southampton, he doesn't get those results, and his team dominates the game, creates the
Yeah.
chances,
Mhm.
but just can't find the back of the net. And I guess on one or two mishaps they could score it on, and they end up losing more than they end up winning. So it's been it's been a pretty not so stellar record for him there.
Yeah.
Official matches, league matches, he went 11 wins, 10 draws, 16 losses. So he only had a win percentage of 30%, 29.73 to be exact. But yeah, man. I mean, before we really dive into his tenure there, and or I guess more stats regarding him, how do you summarize his time at Leeds?
I think his time at Leeds. So let me be clear. I think this wasn't a situation of just the recent events, right? It isn't a situation of the last, I don't know, 5 games or whatever. I think he has been building up to this specific moment where when he joined, he had a good display of performance just because of, I guess, being a newcomer in the league and then implementing a system that at the very beginning was new to the competition on EPL. And as he progressed with the team, he was always criticized by this one thing where he was a very systemic coach. He wasn't able to adapt to different games, and he was always persistent on following the same game style. So that works on the first half of the season, but after teams know how figure you out and know how you play, they start to neutralize you, and then you have these situations that you summed it up pretty much. He always had possession. He was always attacking. He was always finding, uh, finishing the offensive plays, but yet to make a goal. And then when they know how you play, it's easy for them to break their defense and then score you, on a easy occasion.
Right.
So yeah, I sum it up to him is like, great for his experience as a coach, great on his resume. I think he's in par with the recent or modern history of EPL where coaches don't last more than a year. I think a year it's saying a little too much for someone like Jesse March.
Right.
But I would say this is a um, unfortunate but not necessarily unexpected.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if we look back on his recent record, he hasn't won a Premier League match since against when he beat Bournemouth 4-3 back on November 5th. I mean, obviously we had the World Cup that kind of took a month away, right? But I mean, that's
Yeah,
still like he hasn't won a Premier League match in like 8 or 9 matches. So that's I mean, you're never you're not going to win games without scoring goals and letting in goals, obviously. And what's weird to me is that the board backed him during this January transfer window. They got
yeah,
McKennie, they got Jorginho, the record signing forward. That's what he was
mhm,
missing, right? He was missing a forward.
exactly.
To He had Patrick Bamford. Bamford has it's like he's either hot or he's cold. He's not really consistent. So he was obviously hoping that Jorginho would be the one to put in those balls, that the chances that they create. But he didn't get a chance to really implement that more than 20 minutes with Jorginho on the field.
I
Um,
know.
but let me go over some of his stats in his previous clubs and kind of use that to analyze, what he did at Leeds there. So he started back in 2011, the Montreal Impact. He was there for 15 months. He had a 33% win rate, so not the best either. 12 wins, 7 draws, 17 losses. Then he was with New York Red Bulls. He joined the Red Bull system, and he was there for 3 years, 7 months, starting in 2015. And there he had a 50% win rate, which in MLS is pretty good, honestly.
Yeah, it's not too
Um,
bad. Uh-huh.
the MLS being as chaotic as it is, that's actually pretty decent. He had 75 wins, 32 draws, and 44 losses. So I mean, he had over 100 wins to his 44 losses, or 100 wins or draws to his
Mhm.
44 losses. Then he stayed within the Red Bull system, went to Salzburg in Austria, and did really well there. He had a 68% win rate there, 64 wins, 13 draws, and 17 losses. And
But
go for it.
I do want to make a comment on here though. It's like he did really great with Salzburg, but it was expected for him to perform. That's the biggest team in Austria.
Yep.
That's the one team in Austria that spends money on players. So he has a great record because that's the only team in Austria.
Yeah, right. It's the only one that qualifies the
Yeah.
Champions League. It's the only one that's backed
Uh-huh.
by money, that Red Bull money. Yeah, I agree.
Hmm.
Because when he went to Leipzig, another Red Bull team after Salzburg, he didn't see the same results. He was only there for 5 months, 8 wins, 4 draws, 9 losses. Um, as I was sorry, I skipped over Salzburg. He won the back-to-back league and back-to-back cup. So I mean, again,
Hmm.
it's expected, right? Um,
Yeah.
then after leaving the Red Bull system, he joined Leeds in February 28, 2022. He was there for almost a year, got fired February 6th. And he did decent his first season coming in, criticized heavily after, they fired the much loved Bielsa that got them up to the Premier League. And
Hmm.
people didn't want, the Leeds fans didn't want Bielsa to go, but they were struggling. They were like in the relegation zone. So he was brought in to keep them above, which he ultimately did. But there hasn't been much progress since then. I think he
Yeah.
finished the season last year 17th. He's 17th right now. Leeds are. So his official record with Leeds, not counting friendlies, was 11 wins, 10 draws, 16 losses at a 29.73% win rate, his lowest of any team he's coached. Um, so yeah,
Hmm.
man. I mean, pretty pretty disappointing spell. Not as disappointing as Bob Bradley with Swansea back in the day, who got fired after like I got fired after like 4 months. At least this guy lasted a
Yeah.
year, but
Uh-huh.
doesn't really bode well for future American coaches out there, right?
I, I agree. And to be fair with, I mean, I guess there's different angles to look at it, right? To be fair with him, you can say that he inherited a team that was, on the, it was on a downward spiral with Marcelo Bielsa. And then on top of that, during the summer, he lost key players like Elder Costa, like Calvin Phillips, and then he recently lost Llorente
And
to
Rafinha,
Roma, so,
Rafinha was a
and
big one.
Rafinha to,
Yeah,
to Barcelona. So, even though this, I'm not trying to excuse him. It's a situation of he lost a lot of key players, and this is not a very he doesn't have the depth on the team that he needs to make it work. So if you look at the roster, it's difficult to pinpoint out who's the star. Like he doesn't have like a key player, a star player who's supposed to stand up to the challenge. And then the other side is, as you mentioned earlier, was he was backed by the owners, trying to sign a lot of the players that he wanted. Although I have the feeling, that he should have made those calls earlier in the year, because during the summer transfer he didn't bring any ammunition and a big names to the team. He waited until the winter transfer. I don't know if the World Cup had to a lot to do with the timing of that. But I think I just feel that he wasted a lot of time to use that cash influx that that Leeds received with the sales of Calvin Phillips and Rafinha to ensure that he had the team that he needed, or at least the team that he wanted.
Right.
So I don't know. It's a tough one to discuss. I think if anything, it does. It, I would say that a lot of people would think that this is a disservice to the American coaches out there in Europe, because he's not making a dent in the EPL. It seems that American coaches do decent outside of EPL, but
Yeah.
when it comes to the English Premier League, for some reason they just cannot catch a break.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know. It's I can, needless to say, I'm pretty sure it's bittersweet for him. Um, but I don't know, dude. I guess it depends on how would you like to see it. If you want to see half a glass half full or half empty. Uh,
Yeah, I agree with you that they should have used the influx of cash earlier, even earlier in the January transfer window. Maybe could have
mhm.
won a couple
Yeah.
other games. He waited till the last day to get McKennie and to get he got Jorginho like a week or two before it closed, but he really wasn't able to use him before
Yeah.
that. But yeah, I mean, he did in the summer. He did bring Adams and Aaronson, and to be fair, Adams has been probably the top one or two players at Leeds this year, and he's been very consistent for them. Aaronson not so much. Started off a little hot, then got cold, and now he's riding the bench.
Hmm.
What I liked that you said was that he doesn't have the depth there. We've seen that because even when he's struggling, even when he has a couple games of loss in a row, he keeps the same starting lineup because there's no one else.
Hmm.
I
Exactly.
mean, who else are you going to bring in? There's
Hmm.
not really that depth. So I don't know. I mean, Leeds is one of the historic clubs in England, and there was always going to be that pressure, and more so for him being American. And I think he was given a fair shot. They were pretty patient with him, and ultimately, it was that Nottingham Forest loss that
Yeah.
sealed the deal. Um,
And the thing is that with nowadays in EPL, if you have a 3 month and a half winless streak,
yeah.
you're looking at your job security now went down, dude. Your stock is going down, so you're probably gonna get sacked.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm surprised he didn't get sacked earlier, but
Hmm.
it was off after all to Nottingham Forest, another team that was lower than them when they played, and then leapfrogged them in the table. And
Keylor Navas was the
yeah,
last nail in the coffin, dude.
yeah. How'd they get him? I have no idea. That's crazy to see him in a Nottingham Forest jersey.
Right,
Um,
I know.
but moving on, kind of from him, what does this mean for the U.S. contingent there at Leeds? Tyler Adams, Brendan
Mhm.
Aronson, and Weston McKennie. Obviously, Weston McKennie had just moved there. He's only played like a half or less than a half of football for Leeds. I don't think his spot is in immediate danger yet. He's one of the bigger stars,
Mhm.
I'd say. There, World Cup, experienced player with Juventus, played with Schalke, played with some of the biggest clubs in Europe. So, I think as long as he performs decent, he'll start there no matter what. Tyler Adams, I don't think can be benched even if they bring somebody in. He's just too important to the team, and especially with that combo of him and McKennie that they work so well off each other. Brendan Aronson's one that is probably going to be right the bench for a while, especially with a new coach. He hasn't done shit this season, and he was already
Yeah.
being benched by an American coach. So I mean, if they bring in another coach, what is that going to do for them? I mean, this is going to
Yeah.
mean more bench time for him. Um, I don't know, man. Do you think if you're one of those American players, what do you feel right now? Are you happy that he's gone just because now they could finally maybe start winning? Are you sad because this is the guy that brought you in and kind of sold you on the project? What do you think these guys are going through right now?
So I guess it depends on who you are, right? I agree with you 100%. Tyler Adams, I don't think he has anything to fear. He's been a outstanding performer with Leeds since he joined. I think he has been a good replacement of Calvin Phillips. So I think his time at Leeds and whoever comes in as a new coach will not hesitate to have him as a starting 11 player. So if I was Tyler Adams outfield, I mean, it sucks that uh, the coach that took you to Leeds, it's leaving because he was a coach that you had during RB Leipzig, so
Right.
you kind of sort of knew him in a way, and then the fact that he's American, it will also helps you out. Um, if I'm Weston McKennie, I am also like I would be a little confused, and just because I say confused just because of the fact that I'm pretty sure Jesse Marsch is the one that actually made the link between Leeds and Weston McKennie. Because if it wasn't for Jesse Marsch, we would have seen Weston McKennie going somewhere else. I don't think he would have joined Leeds as easy as he did. So having Jesse Marsch definitely helped him out. But at the same time, I think Weston McKennie at this point in time in his career, he is one of those players that his resume in Europe is well known because he was playing at Juventus.
Hmm.
So being at Juve helped him out a lot in terms of getting his name out there. So I think if regardless of the coach that comes in, I think he's going to look at McKinney as a very strong potential starting 11 player. It would all depends on the style of play that that coach wants to implement. If he wants to have a doble pivote with the two center midfielders, which will be Tyler Adams and Weston McKennie, or if the coach wants to play with just one center midfielder, which in this case I would say Tyler Adams has the advantage just because of being there for the longest time. But if I was Brendan Aronson, I think I will be if I was Brendan Aronson, I will be worried. And exactly to the point that you mentioned is he started hot. He's been dwindling down for the last couple of months, even before the World Cup, and now after the
Yeah.
World Cup, he hasn't been starting uh, recently. But at the same time, I wouldn't be worried about a potential transfer. I'll be worried because I probably won't have enough time playing on the pitch, regardless of who's the coach. But on the other hand, I can also see myself, if I do a good job and I perform out there, I might be in a position where I can regain that spot just because of Leeds lacking uh, of a robust team, right? So I
Right.
think the three of them are in a safe spot in the sense that if you look at the roster, the competition is not too hot, right?
It's not like
I think
Pulisic
that
at Chelsea, right?
exactly. So if if they put in the work in practice, if they have good performances, they week in and week out, they can probably, Aaronson can probably regain his spot and be there as a starting 11 player. And then I think Adams and most of McKinney have an advantage of both having a decent career in Europe so far. So it's again, I think it's just like with Jesse March, depending on the angle you want to see it, depending on the perspective you want to look at. It's how worried I will be. But definitely, out of the three of them, I would say Brandon Aronson should be the one with the highest, I guess, stress or worry for
Right.
what's coming next, just because of the fact that he's been being relegated to a bench position. But we'll see. I don't really see any of them leaving anytime soon. The team,
Well,
just because of
McKennie's
that
there
specific fact.
on loan, right? He's on loan to the end of the season,
Yeah.
and I mean, if he
Hmm.
performs, I think there's a clause that they'll buy him or whatever if they stay up. But
Hmm.
yeah, so he's probably less stressed just because I mean, if whatever happens, he'll go back to Juve if anything happens bad, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you're right. It's not Chelsea, it's not one of the bigger teams, so it's just up to them to win over the new coach, and shouldn't. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't want to say it shouldn't be that hard. It's going to be hard, obviously, but it's not going to be as hard as if you were playing for like Serginho Dest at Barcelona or Pulisic at Chelsea or whatever. All right,
Yeah.
one last item I kind of want to touch on here before we kind of wrap up the Jesse Marsch RIP episode. Um,
Hmm.
what does this mean for the USMNT, who's still kind of looking for a coach, right? The
Hmm.
US team, the US Federation has kind of stated that they're in no rush. They kind of first want to hire a sporting director and a general manager, and then and that's before the Women's World Cup, which is in the summer. So that kind of tells you that they're in no rush to hire anything, which sucks because you want the new coach to spend as much time as possible with their players in this short 3.5 years to the next World Cup. So, especially in a short window where they don't have to qualify, there's no qualifying games. So, what does this mean for USMNT? Are they going to look towards Jesse Marsch now? You and I have kind of discussed, and we're not opposed really to an American coach coming in. Uh, I think we discussed that we'd kind of like to see them branch out, maybe at least
Yeah,
interview other, European, South Americans. Um, but if they were going to go an American coach, I think the one that would be on most people's radar and most people's top list of American coaches would probably be Jesse Marsch, just
it
because
has to.
of his resume. There's talks of if you're going to go American coach, it might be Steve Cherundolo, who just won the
Hmm.
Liga or MLS with LAFC. Um,
Yeah.
it might be Jim Curtin, the Philadelphia Union guy, who's done extremely well. He has a really small market in a sense. It's obviously Philadelphia is not a small market, but the team is kind of. They're not
It is.
they're not like LAFC or Galaxy or Inter Miami or NYCFC, right? They're kind of a
Hmm.
smaller team, and he's taken
Yeah.
them to the Supporter Shield and to the final. He was close to winning the final, so he's a good candidate if you're talking Americans. But I think the one with the best resume, the one where we say, he knows the MLS, he's coached in the MLS, he knows Europe, he's coached in Europe. It could be a good fusion
Hmm.
of the two. Would be Jesse Marsch.
Jesse
Um,
March. Yeah.
for sure. And even Jim Curtin has come out and said, the only thing he'd leave Philadelphia for is the USMNT, and it doesn't even have to be the starting coach. Like he said, he'd be willing to be like backup to Jesse Marsch. Um,
That's
so
crazy.
yeah, to kind of sell
Uh-huh.
yourself short. Um, but yeah, man, I don't know. Obviously the USMNT are for sure going to interview him now, and knowing how the USMNT is and the US Federation is and their um, they had a real hard time and real hard decision when they hired Jurgen Klinsmann being a and they only hired him, I think, at the time he was a foreigner, but he'd been living in the United States
Hmm.
for 20 years, and he's a U.S. citizen, living here
Ah,
for so long.
gotcha.
So that's kind of the only reason that I think they hired him. Because other than that, it's been nothing but like
Interesting.
Americans. Yeah. So I mean, they kind of like to play it safe with just hiring Americans. So I mean, this honestly, I'm expecting Jesse Marsch to be the next coach now. But again, like we said, man, I hope they at least kind of branch out and try to interview a couple others.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think he's definitely gonna be on the short list now, just because of his resume, and he is the best American coach available right now. No matter where you put him, regardless of his tenure in RB Leipzig or just being successful at RB Salzburg. Um, I think out of the pool, because you have a very shallow pool to begin with, right?
Right.
Um, as for American coaches, but I think that the decision shouldn't be based on nationality because of the World Cup cycle that we have on our hands, which is very short compared to other times. And then if the U.S. Soccer Federation is going to make a decision, it has to be the decision of who is the best available. Whether that coach is American, it's a different conversation, but it has to be whoever is the best option out there for the team. Now, if you tell me that it is Jesse Marsch, then okay, right? That's the only one available because honestly, if we're dreaming, you would love to see the likes of Guardiola or Zidane join the USMNT, but I think those are just very very
Dreams.
very 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 yeah, big dreams,
But,
difficult to accomplish. So the only downside that I see with Marsh joining the USMNT, because again, if he's the best option out there and he gets the job, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. Definitely could have do better, but if he's the chosen one, the only one downside that I see is that he comes from the RB philosophy. And if you are aware of the RB philosophy, is that even though they have a system, they are very chaotic on every single thing that they do. It's a team that is essentially, the system is balls to the wall. Let's get things done. It's chaotic with big changes every season in, season out. And so that philosophy is easy to implement when you have players on a weekly basis, but when you have players for maybe like 20 games a year, I think it's going to be difficult for them to buy his speech and for him to convince them to follow his lead. So, um, I again, I think he's definitely gonna be on the short list. If it was
yeah.
up to me, I hope he's not the chosen one. But man, I think I hope that he just this just stays in rumors. That it just stays as a he said, I said, whatever thing.
Right.
Because I don't think it will be mutual beneficial for the USMNT and Jesse Marsch.
Yep, I agree. Okay, so that wraps up our episode on Jesse Marsch and his sacking. So hopefully he is back coaching club here shortly. He's had his ups and downs, obviously, with his different clubs, but he's we mentioned if we were going with an American team or an American coach for the USMNT, he'd probably be the best.
Mhm.
Even his record in MLS is crazy good with NY Red Bulls.
Yeah.
So they could do worse. They could do worse than him. But again, we obviously would like to see somebody else. So good luck, Jesse Marsch. Hopefully, you get another European coaching gig soon. Adrian, as we're wrapping this up, man, where can our listeners find us?
Well, on top of finding us on YouTube and any podcast service, they can find us on Twitter and Instagram at Puro Pinche Gol. Make sure to check us out. We'll be posting out some wild stuff out there.
Yeah, make sure to follow us on your social media platform of choice. And well, Adrian, it was a pleasure as always, man. I'll see you on the next one, brother.
Take it easy, man.
See you, man.